The City of Annapolis primary election is Tuesday, September 16th. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and if you are in line by 8, you will still be able to vote. There is no Republican primary this year, as all Republican candidates are unopposed and will advance to the November general election. On the Democratic side, there are contested races for mayor and in wards 1, 3, 4, and 6. If you received a mail-in ballot, it must be received, not just postmarked by 4:30 p.m. on September 12th. Ballots can be mailed, dropped in an official drop box, delivered to City Hall, or taken to your polling place on Election Day. Ion Annapolis offered every candidate in the challenge race the opportunity to speak with us. We reached out to each campaign 3 times. Each candidate was asked these same questions, and their answers are presented here, unedited and in their own words. No one received the questions in advance, and in fairness, all of these conversations are being released at the same time. We do plan to do something similar for the general election once the ballot is set. Please have a listen to each of these candidates so you can make an informed vote. Well, on the phone today with us is Ben Bramsen, who is a candidate as a Democrat in Ward 1, the very crowded Ward 1 race for Alderman in the city of Annapolis. And we're going to talk about some citywide issues and some ward-wide issues that are really going to affect the voters when they go out. And again, to anybody who's listening, please make sure that you investigate all of your candidates, make the best vote for you. Don't go blindly into an election and just willy-nilly vote, or, because I like somebody's last name or I like the suit they were wearing or whatever. Make an informed vote, because that makes our city that much better. Ben, thank you so much for your time today, and good luck in the primary that's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to also thank you for doing this, not just for me, but for all candidates. I think this is a great opportunity. So often we are speaking in short little clips. We're trying to get our thoughts in 30 seconds before it goes on to the next person at a forum or whatever it might be. So I think this is a great opportunity for all voters to be able to get more long form information on all the candidates. So I appreciate it.
Well, I do have an appointment in Severna Park at 12:30, so we're going to have to keep. I know we're looking into the political world, and it can go a little bit long. So
I'm a yapper too, so we'll have to set a timer or something.
There you go. Well, let's get right into it. I mean, one of the big things down there in your ward is the city dock and city dock resiliency and flooding. The project that is underway, I mean, we've got the dirt that's being moved and the backhoes have been moved in, the fencing has been put up there, designed to protect the downtown from frequent flooding and sea rise. Do you support that current city dock plan? And I guess, how would you ensure its success? Because it's still a little bit in flux if elected into the alderman seat.
Mm-hmm. If there's one thing that we in Ward 1 at least don't get enough opportunity to talk about, it's city dock, because nobody just ever wants to talk about it. So I appreciate that question. No, for any of the other candidates, they know that's the number one topic for many, many people. So and timely for today, because I just saw that there is a notice for flood warning later on as well that was just put out there. So when it comes to the city dock, yes to flood mitigation, and I think you're going to probably hear that from any candidate. I think we all universally agree that mitigation has to happen. Flooding down there and on the dock street and the businesses and areas around Dock Street, it's becoming a universally regular problem at this point, and something has to be done. It's too many businesses are bearing the brunt of financial burden when that happens, whether it be having to fix up their stores or their locations because they got damaged, or in some cases just the time away from not being able to operate. And while some larger corporate-owned organizations might be able to eat that cost, small and local business owners cannot. So if something's not done, we're going to start to drive those businesses away, and that will be incredibly damaging to downtown Annapolis, because those small, unique businesses are kind of the heart of what makes it a great place to come and visit. Nobody wants to come to downtown to visit a bunch of, Subways and Chipotles and things like that. No offense, we need those, but the uniqueness of the businesses, the shops, the restaurants that we have is what makes it special down there. So 100% flood mitigation has to happen down there. I also am in agreement with the park project because I think that can be a great, clean, free green space that can be enjoyed by anybody and everybody within our community. I don't know how often you hear the term third space, but it's becoming a more and more popular term because people, especially people of lower income, especially people of younger age, don't have a good third space outside of school or work and home to go to. And I think this can be something that will provide that to people, and it will be something that will be able to be everybody can handle, regardless of your wealth class. What I don't agree with, I don't know if that was going to be a follow-up question, but I can just go ahead and go into it. What I don't agree with is using spot zoning to give permission to businesses to build, specific businesses to build. I think spot zoning is a very dangerous road to go down. I think it allows the opportunity to, one, start to create distrust in government. I think spot zoning will make people feel that there can be favoritism being played to businesses, because why does X business get the ability to exceed the height limits while Y or Z business do not get that opportunity to do so? So I'm not in agreement with using spot zoning to bypass historic policy and laws and zoning. I also am not a fan of using it as an opportunity for luxury items. We don't need a yacht club. We don't need all of these expensive projects that will look really nice, but aren't going to help the majority of the people in this city. I go around and I talk to a lot of people, and my campaign is, I'm a populist. I have a strong focus on affordable living and affordable housing. And the reality is a lot of those people, non-homeowners, specifically in Ward 1, they do not care about the city dock project at all. Outside of the flooding aspect, they don't care about it. So we need to be able to take that information and be able to know this money's got to go elsewhere. We've got people struggling to put groceries on their table. They're struggling to buy supplies for school. Back to school is back in progress now. They're struggling to buy supplies, and we need to be able to focus on that instead of buying luxury items that is only going to be able to be enjoyed by a select few amount of people in the community.
Fair enough. I'll tell you, I want to switch over to crime and public safety. And I mean, several neighborhoods are facing a lot of public safety challenges. And I'll pick on my own ward in Ward 7 and 24. We had a homicide, 2 rapes, and multiple robberies. And, statistically, it was one of the worst in the city for violent crimes. Of course, there are common issues like thefts from unlocked vehicles citywide. They've talked about different discussion or solutions for better street lighting, community policing, and everything else. What do you think we need to do to improve the public safety in Annapolis? Or do you think it's fine?
I don't think it's fine. I think we have drastically improved in some aspects. I believe property crime has been improving. Unfortunately, violent crime has not, and that's something that needs to be addressed. I think part of it is that when it comes to public safety, you can't address public safety if you refuse to acknowledge and address poverty and income inequality at the same time. Study after study after study is going to tell you those two things are very intertwined with each other. And, you talk about things like intergenerational mobility. For those that don't know, that's essentially if you have young people that grow up in low-income families and they struggle to be able to move to upper social classes due to, continued poverty, lower education where they live, whatever it might be, they'll tend to remain in poverty, and that can increase violence within the community. So we've got to kind of look at upstream forward thinking when it comes to public safety. So there's a handful of things that I think, there's a lot of things that we can do, but a couple of line items that I think we can work on is one, we've got to improve the financial security programs. That can look like a lot of different things. One is going to be housing. I don't know if you're going to ask that later, so I won't go into the full part of it, but part of that is housing people can afford. There's a lot of conversation that comes with affordable housing. I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about it when they talk to you as well. What tends to happen in these conversations is the conversation is simply, we need more low-income housing for people that are struggling financially. We need to build more housing because we don't have enough housing as it is. Those are all true, but we also need more housing that people can afford. So it's not just about can we build more low-income housing for low-income people, but what about our working class? Can we create housing that those people can afford? Because when you have our working class, like police officers, our EMT workers, our firefighters, our teachers, if they can't afford to live in the community that they're working in, that creates problems for us. We can improve youth workforce development programs within the city. And there's one thing, I think you're going to talk to Craig Cusimiano a little bit later, I believe. Mm-hmm. He's running for Ward 6. I've met and I've talked with him a little bit. I don't want to go too much into the details of his thoughts because it's his program, but he talks a little bit about UBI, and I think that's to an extent something that we could look into, because if we can even provide something like $500 a month to our most impoverished, most vulnerable, most underserved communities, that can make a world of difference in being able to help starting to raise the floor and increase the availability of quality of life that those people have. And that will make a big difference on that intergenerational mobility.
It totally will. And then despite the fact that you've not seen my notes before this, you ran right into my point 3 there for housing. So that's a good thing. Economic development. Annapolis's economy relies real heavily on tourism and government, which has contributed to income inequality and a reputation that it is difficult to do business here. Some local entrepreneurs have even said, I'm just never spending money in this town again, out of frustration with the red tape. What are your ideas? And I realize that as an alder person, you are one voice of 9 on the city council. But what are your ideas to make the city more business friendly while still preserving the charm and character that the tourism is built on?
It is a problem, and it's a problem everywhere, but it's specifically a problem in Ward 1 because we have so many historic buildings and things that add additional, I don't want to call it red tape. Historic preservation is incredibly important, but add more steps, more cost, more time to people that want to operate business. I actually have a friend who built out a business right on Maryland Avenue, and just to make some simple repairs, it took him about an additional 12 months of fighting through paperwork. I think he said it cost him about $6,000 to be able to do. And it was all revolved around putting a water fountain into his business. And I think there's things like that, like you said, that there's so much that people have to fight through. And the unfortunate reality is that small business owners, local business owners, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the will or the want to be able to do that. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to push all those people out elsewhere. And the only people that will be able to afford to come into Annapolis and downtown Annapolis is going to be large corporate entities. The Atlases of the world are going to essentially run downtown if that's what it comes to, because they are the ones that can afford the financial burden of fighting through all of that. So part of the charm of downtown Annapolis, and if I'm allowed to just kind of back up a little bit here, I am not native to Annapolis. I moved to Annapolis, and the reason that I came here was because I've lived in a lot of different places in my life. I'm from Iowa originally, lived in Indiana, I lived in Hawaii, I lived in Minnesota, I lived in Virginia before here, and I just took a trip to Annapolis, and I immediately fell in love with the charm of downtown Annapolis. And we are at risk of losing that charm if we are pushing out and making it so difficult for small business owners to be able to operate and open. And all we get is corporate entities. I don't think I would have fallen in love with downtown if we didn't have the chicken roofs of the world that were down here. And it was all just chain restaurants. So part of that tourism, there's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, it's the maritime aspect of it. There's the Naval Academy. There's the State House. There's all of those things as well. But part of the tourism that brings in so much money and revenue to us is having that local and unique feel. So we've got to make policy easier, especially for those small business owners. We've got to be allowed to be able to cut through red tape. When it comes to things like historic preservation, it's incredibly important, but I think we need to take a step back and also try to recognize what is preservation and what is renovation. Are we changing the facade of a historic building? Are we ripping out and changing the guts of one? Or are we just trying to replace a rotting floor so that it's safe for people to be able to walk on? It should not take someone a year to replace a rotting floor. That should be something they should be able to get quick and easy approval for, because it's not affecting the historic aspect of that building. So I think we've got to have common sense in what we're doing, especially if we want to drive local small business owners. I think we can create some policy to be able to expedite the process, especially for people that are that live here locally and want to own and operate here locally.
True. Sliding into transportation and traffic, I know that's also been another favorite conversation of everybody across the city, along with City Doc. But we've got a problem with congestion and parking shortages, especially during the tourist season and certain events that are here. Public transit operations or public transit options are very limited, and residents often complain about the difficulty in getting around. In a recent debate, I know that candidates were asked about their ideas to improve public transportation over the next 4 years, and I sort of want to piggyback on that. So what are your plans to improve mobility in the city? Parking garages and street parking are a nightmare. How do we solve this?
Yeah, and I have street parking. I live in downtown Annapolis, and I have street parking. And, if you ask me on the day of a Navy football game or any of the wealth of events that happen downtown, even tomorrow when we've got the 10K going on, it's a question of, do I want to even go do something and go somewhere? Because the chances of me finding a parking place where I live are going to be so minimal that I might not want to go get groceries, because I'm going to have to walk 3 miles with my bags of groceries just to find a parking spot. So it's a very real problem. Part of it is we've got to, and I will recognize, as someone who doesn't have a political background, who hasn't worked within the politics of Annapolis, that I don't know the deep details of the contracts that have been signed with some of the organizations that we do work with. But we've got to revisit that. I think one thing that we can do is we can increase our public transportation. I think we can make it free, particularly for Annapolitans, for people who live here, to be able to increase their ability to get around, their mobility. And that, I think, can even go back to things like we talked about earlier when it comes to public safety, when it comes to poverty. Just creating a system like that won't just be able to help some of the congestion and the ability to get around here. It's going to help make things safer for families. It's going to help kids get from high school to after-school curricular activities instead of going out and hanging out in a parking lot or whatever it might be. And it'll help congestion, because right now, a lot of people that are driving in and out of Annapolis are working here but don't live here because they can't afford to live here. So we've got to make room, one, to be able to compete with that congestion, but we've also just got to make this a more affordable place for people to live in, so that they can work here and live here. I'm sure many people would love for nothing more than to be able to live downtown or live in Ward 1 and be able to walk to their job on Main Street. But the reality is that it is so expensive to live here that that's just not a reality for them. So they have to drive into town. I think there are things that we can do outside of just, building more parking garages or things along those lines that can actually make a long-term impact, because just changing parking and trying to fix parking is not a long-term solution. That might help us for the next 4 years. That's not going to help us in 10 years. That's not going to help us in 20 years. And we're just going to be revisiting this problem over and over and over again if Annapolis continues to be a place that the people who work here can't afford to live in.
Well, you mentioned the high school and extracurricular activities in the transportation thing. And we want to talk about a little bit about education and youth programs. And I know the city government doesn't really control the schools at all, which are actually run by the county. But we do have an impact on education and youth in Annapolis. We do have schools within the city limits and everything else. How would you support educational opportunities and youth programs throughout the city?
So a little bit about my background. I actually work in after-school education. I work for an organization that teaches math after school for students. So education's an aspect that's kind of near and dear to my heart in that prospect of it. But in regards to what we're talking about, I think largely after-school programs, youth community programs, things like those are generally going to be things to, again, you're going to hear me do this throughout our conversation. It all kind of always goes back to poverty, and it all kind of always goes back to income inequality, because the people who need access to those community groups the most generally are the people who can't afford to participate in them, or the families that maybe mom and dad work 2 or 3 different jobs. So it's not that they don't want to have their kids participate in them. It's that they can't get them from school to whatever that after school curricular is. I'm in large support of after school youth programs. I'm in large support of, I think we can work to create better mentorship and apprenticeship programs. We can bolster some nonprofit organizations that work within our community to be able to help those sort of things. But when it comes down to it, again, I'm going to harp on this. I think a lot of families want to be able to have their kids participate in these kind of programs. I think they want to be able to watch their kids participate in these programs and take them to participate in these programs. But unless you have the wealth to be able to have the ability to pick your kid up at 3 o'clock and get them to an extracurricular or a community event or whatever it might be by 3 or 3:30, you probably don't have that. We can make an immediate resolution by providing free public transportation for everybody, by bolstering and increasing public transportation, especially the time that it runs. Can we get more public transportation running between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock to be able to help that? Can we add more bus stops around those areas, around schools, around community centers and things along those lines, to be able to help provide more opportunity for those kids? But again, it also comes down to, we've got to create a livable place for people to be able to be, so that they don't have to work 3 jobs. So we're not dependent on their kid being able to get on the bus right at 3:15 to get to an event by 3:30, because they can go and they can pick them up and they can get them there and they can watch them. Maybe it's a sporting event, maybe it's a concert, maybe it's a STEM event. I work in STEM, so I love to see students participating in STEM events. And those parents and those guardians want to be able to see that too. Can we create an Annapolis that allows them to be able to do that instead of having to rush to their second job so that they can make rent this month?
Fantastic. Sliding over into some governance and leadership topics here. Transparency and ethics. City residents do expect open and ethical government. As stated in their ethics guidelines, holding the public trust requires maintaining high ethical standards. And that's a quote from the city's ethic guidelines. How are you going to promote transparency and accountability at City Hall when you're sitting in that Ward 1 seat?
That's the most important aspect of government. Right now in 2025, and really over the course of, I'm not even going to just say the last 8 to 10 years, probably really over the course of the last 20 to 30 years, there has become an increasing lack of trust in our government entities, largely at the federal level, but that trickles down as well to state and local levels. So we need representatives that are going to actually represent us. When it comes to ethics, it's pretty easy for me, for example, for my campaign. I at least was. I won't speak for one candidate who recently jumped in because she doesn't really have anything on our website. But for the large part of this campaign, I have been the only candidate that is refusing to take donations. Not that I think people are necessarily bought or sold by donations, but I think if you accept donations, you open up that or you lack of visibility in some cases of what came with those donations. And I don't fault for those that do. That's the game that we're playing right now. But I have instead said, please don't donate to me. If you want to make a donation to my campaign, go to the donate tab on my website, benforannapolis.com. Sorry, had to throw that in there. And,
we're going to get the links in there anyway, so don't worry about that.
And follow the links, because I've got multiple links on there of local organizations and federal organizations that will help our homeless and unhoused communities. I think when it comes to ethics, that's part of it. What are your candidates doing to actually make an impact and help those within their community? And that is a problem in Annapolis, but that is definitely a problem in Ward 1. And instead of giving me money so that I can buy yard signs or giving me money so that I can buy Facebook ads, I would much prefer that people who support what I believe go in and actually support what I believe by making those donations. So ethics are definitely important there. I am just an ordinary guy. I don't have a wealth of political background. In fact, I have no political background. I obviously don't have a war chest of donations because I'm not accepting donations. I am just an ordinary guy who has looked at our local elected government and said, I'm not seeing enough here that is actively going to help our most vulnerable communities, and that's why I need to run. Those people need a voice. I talk to so many people that are disengaged because they feel that they are not wealthy enough or they are not powerful enough or they don't have enough connections to be able to have a voice in our local politics. I want to be that voice for people. And by doing so, I am always going to be open for anybody to be able to talk to. I've got people that regularly reach out to me through my website where I have the availability to people to reach out. I am the person that directly answers anybody that reaches out to me on my website. I do not have a team of people that do. If you ask me a question, that answer is coming directly from me. I've had people reach out on Facebook. I will throw it out here most Mondays through Fridays from like 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock in the morning. I am at the Brown Mustache, the coffee shop in Old Fox Books on Maryland Avenue. Come and talk to me. I'm usually doing work for my real world paying job there, but I'm more than happy to stop if someone wants to come up to me and they want to talk to me. And I get that plenty, not just from my ward, but people from all over the place. And I think part of the moral and ethics standpoint and visibility is also this weird dynamic that I see more and more as I've been running a campaign of ward versus ward. And that's something that is really weird to me. I understand I am here to represent Ward 1, but I'm also here to represent Annapolis. And there's a lot of, well, what's in it for Ward 1? And I have to stop and say, everything's always in it for Ward 1. If we've got a problem in Ward 6 or we've got a crime problem in, I'm not saying this is where they're at, but if we've got a crime problem in Ward 3 or whatever it might be, that's a problem for Ward 1 as well, because those things trickle down. We are not separated by gates and fences. So this weird dynamic that I think helps create this distrust in others in our government of it's my ward versus the 7 other wards is something that's got to stop. We've got to actually work together. We've got to communicate with each other. And it might bug some people that I have to say this, but sometimes there might have to be decisions that aren't fully advantageous for the people in Ward 1, but it's going to be for the people in Ward 2 and Ward 8 and Ward 6. And in the long run, that's going to help us all.
Makes sense. Past administration, the current mayor and council have been in since 2017. They're mostly, for the most part, leaving office. There's been a lot of discussion about their legacies. One candidate for mayor praised Mayor Buckley as saying one of the best mayors we've ever had. There's also been a lot of criticism. For example, the City Docks project cost ballooned from $40 million to nearly $100 million right now, making us reliant on this grant for $33 million from FEMA, which may or may not show up. In your view, what did the outgoing administration do right? And maybe where did it fall short?
Ooh, that's an interesting question that I didn't have notes for here prepared for. So good job with that one. I think part of it, I want to start with the caveat that I am, at least in comparison to others running, relatively new to Annapolis. So for Mayor Buckley's the entirety of his time as mayor, I have not lived in Annapolis. So the only Annapolis that I know that I have lived in and I have experienced is under Gavin. So kind of keep that in mind with this. I think there are a lot of good things that have been done for the people of Annapolis, but I don't think that everything that is being done is in the best interest of those that most need it. I think we've gotten a lot of movement when it comes to working with businesses, but I don't know if necessarily it's always the best, because as we talked about earlier, it has become increasingly difficult for small and local businesses to operate. And that might not, if you just look at the bottom line of what's our revenue that we're getting in the city, it might be fine because we're still getting revenue with all of these corporate entities. But if we don't address the problem of small local business owners, we are going to die out as a city. Again, I'm gonna deviate slightly for just a quick second. I come from Iowa. If you've ever been in Iowa before, it's mostly all small towns. And every single one of those towns very loudly touts the historic aspect of those towns. But when you go into, especially their historic main streets, but when you go into those towns, it's a bunch of just ghost towns, really. And it's a bunch of businesses that are boarded up, and their historic downtown does not exist. And the reality is that if we want a thriving Annapolis, yes, we do need to make some decisions on what businesses are here, how can we generate revenue for the city, but we also need to make decisions for the long term of how can we get people to live here? How can we get people to afford to live here? How can we get small businesses to be able to come here? Because those are the hearts of historic areas, not the large corporate chains that you can go to Severna Park, or you can go to College Park, or you can go to Gamblis or any other city and still go to that same store or restaurant. So we've made some good decisions there. But again, it comes down to the fact that this is a hard place to live in. I was meeting with another candidate a couple of weeks ago, and we were at ceremony, and we were just kind of talking about affordable living. And I had a discussion with that other candidate about how I had been approached earlier in the campaign to drop out of the Democratic primary. And obviously I'm still here and I'm talking to you today, so that did not happen. But it got into a conversation of people can't afford to live here. And I had a young woman come up to us, and she stopped us and she interrupted us, or she didn't interrupt us. She apologized for interrupting, which she did not do, but she wanted to thank us both for being able to talk about that. She doesn't live in Annapolis. She lives in D.C. She wants to live in Annapolis. She loves Annapolis, but she has been priced out of Annapolis. And that's insane to think about when someone who lives in D.C. can't afford to live in Annapolis. And I think that has got to be part of the legacy that we also look at when it comes to this. In the last 5-10 years, how much more difficult has it gotten to be able to have our younger people, to be able to have our working class people, to be able to have our blue collar workers be able to live in Annapolis? And I tell you, it's not easy. We're continuing to price people out. And the reality is as we do that, we're going to kill the diversity in our city, because wealth is unequal to race in a lot of cases. And we're going to, unfortunately, get a lot more people that the only ones that can afford to live in there are people that look like me, white men. And that's going to destroy this city. So we've brought some good revenue in. We've brought some businesses in. I think aspects of City Dock are really good and necessary. But we've got to take a step back and look at the fact that a lot of the decisions that we're making right now are only there to help our homeowners, are only there to help the wealthy that live here, are only here to help the politically connected. And we're not doing a whole lot to be able to help those that don't have that power and don't have that voice.
Budget. We often have to do more with less, if you will. We have a ton of business or a ton of property in town that doesn't pay taxes. That would be the state, the church, the Naval Academy. We're looking at federal cuts all around potentially. And as a council member, what would be your budget priorities if all of a sudden, we really have to buckle in?
This is a tough one for me. This is one of those ones where I will admit that as someone who is not in the political world and political sphere, I might not have the best answers for those, because I don't have either access to all the information or I don't have the access that I need for the questions that I have. But there are very likely, especially in this politically world, because at least for the next 3 years, we're probably not going to see things get better at a federal level. We are facing the possibility of losing federal funding for a lot of projects that we have. or even state funding, because the state is going to be losing that funding from the federal government. So there is a harsh reality that we are going to have to take a look at where we are spending money, and we're going to have to prioritize where the money is being spent. There are quite likely, I think this also comes down to City Doc as well, that there are some luxury items or there are some pet projects that are going on that we are no longer going to be able to afford. And when it comes down to it, if we've got to make cuts and we've got to make changes, the people that should be affected the least in those cuts and changes are the people that need the help the most. And it comes down to, I've said this at a couple of the forums that I've been in, if you come to me and your first question is, what's in it for me? Why should I vote for you? What's in it for me? Then you're probably not someone that's going to vote for me anyway, because I think we are in a society that has to work to each other. And if you are in a more comfortable place than 90% of our population, then you need to understand that I'm not going to raise taxes. That is certainly not my intention for anybody. But you need to understand that we need to help the more vulnerable before we can help everybody else. We need to raise the floor so that we can make Annapolis better. So when it comes down to it, there are some but there are some items that we can do to bring in quick revenue. I think one thing we need to review is short-term rentals. Annapolis on paper has some pretty good short-term rental laws and policies, but in reality, we don't enforce really hardly any of it. We need stricter enforcement with that. We need stricter penalties for those that are operating as a short-term rental, but not paying the costs as a short-term rental, aren't registered as a short-term rental. And they need to be, in my opinion, excessive penalties as well. Short-term rentals are becoming a large part of our housing crisis, especially in Ward 1. I can't tell you how many houses here are used, a couple of times a year, and then I just see people going in and out of them and what I assume is a short-term rental, but not registered short-term rental. We've got to crack down on that, and there's a quick revenue boost that we can get just from providing actual enforcement of some of the policies that we currently have in place.
Fantastic. Well, voters often feel disconnected from their officials. You elect them in, and then you don't see them for another 3 years and 6 months. How do you plan to engage the public and your constituents and stay accountable to them between the elections?
Well, like I said, I'm always going to be available. I'm always going to provide access to everybody, not just through, if I'm elected, you've got your city email address and stuff like that. I'm going to provide them access. I'm going to keep my website up so they can access me through my website. As I said, I don't plan on it changing. And for the last 4 years, every Monday through Friday, I've gone into Brown Mustache to work every morning. I don't plan on that changing. So they will always have access to me there. But I think part of it is continuing to be a part of your community, not just through community involvement, but, in a campaign, you do a lot of door knocking. And I'll be honest, as a slightly introverted, I'm a pretty introverted person. Door knocking is an uncomfortable thing for me. It feels weird as a non-politician to just walk up to someone's door, knock on it, and ask them, what do you think about your local government? But it's a necessary aspect of a campaign, and I think it should be a necessary aspect as a member as well. Does that mean that it's going to be as aggressive and it's going to be as am I knocking on 100 doors in a day or whatever it might be if I'm an elected official? Probably not, because I'll have other jobs to do as well. But I think one aspect that I focus on that not necessarily other candidates do is that I don't just focus on likely voters. In fact, I don't really focus specifically on likely voters at all. So what happens is during the campaign, our elected officials focus on likely voters. Likely voters tend to be specific demographics. That tends to be what you hear. Those tend to be the people that you talk to throughout the entirety of your time in your position. I am more than happy to talk to registered Republicans, even if they're not going to vote for me. I am more than happy to talk to unregistered people, even if they're not going to vote for me. I want to be able to have access to everybody within my ward. because it's not just those that are going to vote for me whose voice matters. Everybody's voice matters. And as someone who is a representative to those people, we need to constantly be in tune with what their voice is. And we need them to have access to provide that to us outside of them getting so fed up that they're going to come to a city council meeting and just yell at us at a city council meeting. I work in leadership. I work in management. One of the aspects is when someone gets to that point that they're so angry about something that they are yelling or they are causing a scene or whatever it might be, it has boiled up to that. And they have gotten to that point because they have felt throughout the way that their voice isn't heard. We need to give their voice access to us at an earlier place than when to the point that they're so fed up that they feel that that's their only ability is to come and yell at a city council meeting.
I want to slide in. Every ward has their own unique concerns, problems, needs, and everything else. In Ward 1, what do you believe is the single most pressing issue facing the community?
I think Ward 1 is an interesting ward. They all are, but Ward 1 is an interesting ward because I think you've got two sides, and I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. You've definitely got the city dock side. That is a large part of what we do. Homeowners especially care about city dock because they are worried about, the sight line, how that's going to affect their home value, how that's just going to affect what they see on a daily basis and things along those lines. So city dock is absolutely an important aspect of a large part of Ward 1. The other part of it is something that I've talked about a lot, but something that not a lot of people think about. I was actually talking to someone at the after the Caucus for African American Leaders event that we did a couple of weeks ago. They live in a different ward. They don't live in my ward, but they specifically said, oh, Ward 1, yeah, that's where all the money is. And there is a decent amount of money in Ward 1 when it comes to who lives here. But the gap between who has and who does not have is significantly larger than it is in a lot of different places and wards. So city dock is an absolutely important aspect. But the ability to live is also an incredibly important aspect here. You've got your people that aren't particularly worried. They might be worried about raising property taxes or things along those lines, which are all valid excuses. But then you've got your people here that are just struggling to live because a one-bedroom apartment is going to cost them $1,600, $1,700, $1,800. And they're going to have to work not just their regular job, but they're going to have to go to Galway Pub to pick up extra shifts after work. And it is becoming increasingly difficult for people to be able to afford to live. And the problem, especially in downtown Annapolis, when it comes to that, is if someone has to make the decision between going to Joss Sushi and getting some sushi rolls and some sake, or being able to pay their rent, they unfortunately are going to have to make the tough decision. Well, it's probably an easy decision, but the unfortunate decision that they got to pay their rent. And that hurts our businesses down here. While we depend largely, or a good chunk at least, on tourism and the revenue that comes in from there, a large amount of revenue comes from the people that live here, that can walk to those restaurants, that can walk to those shops and buy something. And if the cost of living continues to increase at the rate that it increases, especially in Ward 1, those businesses are going to start to struggle because the people that can't afford to live here can't afford to go buy supplies there or buy groceries or buy food or whatever it might be. I had a condo that was across the street from me that went for sale. This was last year. It's a one-bedroom condo, nothing fancy or special about it. It was $930,000. Is that an exception? Possibly, yeah. But I think the cheapest you're going to find housing to buy in Ward 1 is probably around the $450,000 area range. And I've had some people tell me, well, that's not too bad. If you just go to a mortgage calculator, you plug in a regular rate, let's say 4.5% to 6% for your mortgage rate, and you do a $20,000 down payment, that's like a $3,000 a month payment that you're making on that mortgage. People can't afford that. People aren't in a place that they can afford a $20,000 down payment, let alone $3,000 a month. So the cost to live, the needing to have housing that you can afford is an increasing problem that is happening in Ward 1. And if it's not addressed, We are going to price people out, and this is going to be a ward that's going to get older and older because younger people can't afford to live here, and it's going to start to die.
Fair enough. Well, I'll tell you, Ben, as we wrap it up, we've got about 14,000 subscribers on the podcast, and whoever listens at Eye on Annapolis or on the socials and everything else. And right now, it's the microphone, if you will, or the telephone is yours. Pitch the listeners. Why should we vote for Ben Bramsen in Ward 1?
Well, like I've kind of talked about throughout this, I am not a politically connected person. I have not run for office before. I have not worked in the political world before. I am not connected to those that have power. So you're not going to see endorsements from some of the biggest names in the city. I'm not even taking donations. So part of what I think makes me unique in comparison to others is that I am that just ordinary person. I am that person that is the 14,000 people currently listening right now. I am every one of you who has sat back and has gotten home from work and worked a 10-hour, 11-hour day maybe, went and sat in traffic for an hour just to try to get home, and then are exhausted at the end of the day and am looking at our leaders that we currently have and say, how is this going to get better? We cannot look at the things happening in the federal world and assume that things are just going to get better on their own. We need leaders that are actually there to make things happen and to actually not just talk about what they want to do, but to put plans and actions into place. I don't think we have enough of that. While I'm not in the political world, I have been in leadership for 20 plus years at this point and within my jobs and where I've worked and what I've done. I've led small groups of people. I've led large groups of people. I have led 7 locations for some jobs. I've led 68 locations in other jobs. I've led hundreds of employees. I've led a dozen of them. I have been there to lead in every different aspect. And as a leader, you have to make decisions that are ultimately going to be in the best place for your team to make your team successful. And to do that, you can't just talk about what you want to do. Ultimately, you've got to put plans into action, and that's what we need. We can't have 4 years right now of talking about this is what I would like to do. We need 4 years of this is the change that's going to be made to help you and to help the most impoverished people. And if you are someone right now on August 22nd and you are sitting here thinking, oh man, rent is coming up. I wonder if I can stretch this paycheck till Friday the 5th. I need to get groceries still. I can't afford to get groceries and I've still got to get rent. If you are that person who's worrying about that right now, then you need leaders that are going to help you. And we can talk about all of the options that we can do. We can talk about low-income housing. Low-income housing isn't going to help you when you have to pay rent on the first of the month, unless you are going to move and you qualify for it and everything else that comes with it. So if you are someone who is thinking, what are we doing to make Annapolis a better place? What are we doing to help those that need help the most? And you need someone who can put those plans into action, then I'm the guy for you. If you want someone to tell you what can you do for me, then you should probably vote for one of the other candidates, because if you're not one who needs help the most, you're not going to get first priority when it comes to me.